Welcome to episode 23 of 100 Years of Marine Corps Tankers, a station dedicated to honoring the legacy of Marine tankers and remembering the stories of what made the community special, told through the words of those Marines that towed the line. This episode is a special one for me personally. Today, I am blessed with the opportunity to interview a Marine officer who I have monitored throughout the years with extreme admiration for all the accomplishments both in and out of the Armor community. Welcome to the channel, Lieutenant Colonel Chris Ashinhurst.
Hey, JR. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, sir. It's my pleasure and my honor. So I'm going to start out with a question here. How did it come to be that you attended the Naval Academy in 2004?
I think a lot of guys know this, but so I'm the son of a Marine. My dad was is a retired Marine officer. Was a Marine before I was born, and so that's all I knew. And then, I always kind of heard about the Naval Academy, and kind of around my sophomore year in high school, my dad was like, "Hey, you at least should apply just to kind of see what happens." And then just by chance, I got recruited to play baseball there. And when I was getting towards, senior year in high school, I decided, if the Naval Academy accepts me, I get an opportunity to go play baseball. I was going to take it. Sure enough, all the stars aligned. I got accepted, and then ended up in Annapolis there the summer of 2000, right after I graduated high school.
That's an interesting comment you made, because you were accepted to play baseball, but the next bullet I have here says that while at the Naval Academy, you were assigned as the USNA Physical Education Department as the assistant sprint football coach. So how does a baseball player come to coach football?
Yeah, so like a lot of guys, I had never played one sport. At any point in my life, I was a football player, a wrestler, and a baseball player in high school. Freshman year at Navy, all I did as a baseball recruit was play baseball. And truth be told, probably around like February of the spring season, after playing a full fall ball season and then going into the spring season, February, March timeframe, I was like bored to tears of baseball. My performance was suffering. My grades weren't that great. And it was actually the baseball coach. I didn't know that the Naval Academy had this sprint football team, which is just like, any other football you would see on a Saturday afternoon, except for there was a weight limit. You had to be 165 pounds. I'm not going to tell you how much I weighed, but I made sure I got down to 165 pounds to play sprint football. It was actually the baseball coach that was like, "Hey, why don't you give that a shot in the fall, and then come back and play baseball in the spring?" We had another guy on the team that played football for, what you see as the Naval Academy football team of the Army Navy game, who played football for that team and then also played baseball. The sprint football coach was a Marine major, still to this day, a Marine major's billet. At the time, it was now General Sparky Renforth, who, if you've ever known General Renforth, he's a man that just kind of inspires you to just want to be a little bit better than you are.
Yes, sir.
Started playing football. So played football in the fall, baseball in the spring, and then I was a quarterback. And then we had a new head coach after Sparky left, and head coach asked me if I wanted to stick around. About half of the coaches for the sprint football team are second lieutenants and ensigns who had recently graduated. Asked me if I wanted to stick around and be the offensive coordinator. And so that's, I love football. It's probably actually my favorite sport. End up sticking around and coaching football for the next season before I checked into the basic school. It was an awesome. It's probably the best job for a second lieutenant, because I think I wore Naval Academy football PT gear type clothes every day for 6 months, and then I just coached football. That's all I did.
What a great experience.
Yeah.
And like you said, later that year, you did attend the basic school in Quantico, Virginia, and it was here that you were designated as an armor officer, and the legacy takes form. So my question here is, what were your early initial thoughts upon receiving word that you were going to be a tank officer?
Well, so my SPC at the basic school was Lieutenant Colonel Dick Steele, who was 1802. Such a phenomenal guy, phenomenal officer. Learned a ton from him at the basic school, mostly how to run up and down Application Trail and Cardiac Hill there for those that are familiar with the basic school, and how to do it in a gas mask. but he had recently come from, I think, First Tanks. He had been in OIF 1. Most of the, SPC time was filled with propaganda of cool tank videos. But to be honest, like a lot of Marine lieutenants showing up, I wanted to be an infantry officer. That's what I wanted to do. That's what I'd wanted to do my entire life, outside of, being a professional athlete in my, my dreamer days. And one day, then Captain Steele sat me down and was like, I didn't have tanks ranked very high on my list. And he was like, why don't you have tanks ranked very high? And I was like, I don't really even know anything about tanks. My dad was an AM tracker. I saw a couple M60s when my dad was at Fort Knox back in the day, and I'd never even seen a tank in real life. And as my joke to this day is, he kind of brainwashed me for the next about hour and a half while I was sitting in a machine gun position during one of the FEXs. And so I flip-flopped my choices. I put tanks as my number one choice. Thought that would just seemed like such an awesome experience. Kids grow up playing with tanks in the backyard, and what an awesome opportunity to do it with Marine tankers. And then the day we get to SPC announcement or MOS announcements, naturally being Ashinhurst, my name's at the top of the list. Captain Steele decides to go in reverse alphabetical order. And the first time all POI, they had done that. And he actually skips me and just walks out of the room.
Wow.
Doesn't say my name, doesn't say an MOS. So I had to be like, hat in hand, walk down to his office and be like, sir, what MOS did I get? And he was like, you know what you got. And I was like, actually, I don't, sir. Like, could you tell me? And he made some snide comment about, don't fail out at Fort Knox at AOBC. And nice. So I was pretty pumped. Like I said earlier, my dad was an AM tracker. He was a huge fan of tanks. He started pushing me that way as I started mentioning it more. And so, my wife just wanted me to be at station in California because her only experience in California was like the San Diego Camp Pendleton corridor. So when I told her there was an opportunity to get stationed in California, I didn't quite mention that it's not the San Diego Camp Pendleton corridor.
A lot of sand.
Yeah, everybody was pretty excited in my family, and obviously it was what I wanted. It was my top choice, and I was real excited about it.
The community is fortunate that it worked out that way. Did you, side question, did you get your dad to finally admit that yes belongs to tanks?
Well, I think deep down inside, and I have to confirm with him, I think he's a retired AM tracker. I think tanks may have been his top choice, but at the time, and this was back in the early 80s, he could swim really well, and obviously that's not something we need to be very good at in our community, unless something has gone really, really bad. But he could swim real well, and so they gave him Amtrax, which I think was his second choice. So yeah, deep down inside, he knows.
He knows. That takes us to 2005, where you were then assigned as your first assignment to 1st Tank Battalion, Company A, Alpha Company, where you served as the platoon commander and subsequently as company executive officer. What were some of your memories from this 1st Tank assignment?
Yeah, so I had that was like any lieutenant. I mean, I think you live or die by that experience as an armor officer, because it's really where you start cutting your teeth. Really where those senior staff and COs in the community really start molding you. And I had such phenomenal senior staff and COs that kind of helped shape me as a tanker and as a Marine officer. Some of the fondest memories, I was like Nick, the new guy, second lieutenant out there. And my first real responsibility as a platoon commander was essentially take like what was probably like the Land of Misfit Toys platoon from across the battalion, and stand guard over range 200, because it was the middle of, I checked in right before Thanksgiving. It's like Steel Night's getting ready to start, but it's really just kind of a battalion exercise because everybody in the division is deploying at a cyclic rate. And they were afraid CEB was going to come in and try to steal the range in the middle of the night. So like me and 10 other Marines had to go out there and just stay awake all night long. I think that was maybe Lieutenant Colonel Slaughter and then Major Kevin Collins way at the time, greeting the new lieutenant, give him an opportunity to go out, say he went out to the field for a night with some Marines. But I checked into Alpha Company. They had just recently come back from a deployment. It's a lot of great experience in the company. Jay Carosha is the tank leader, and really, his leadership. Captain MJ Walters was the company commander. Some guys who ended up getting out, like Lieutenant Danny James was the XO, and really kind of helped start forming me. And we went to Iraq, did a turnover at the Haditha Dam with Drew Shalais and then Gunny Formella. Great turnover over there. And then really I was up in Haditha, and that was really kind of the only place in that part of the Anbar province where something was still going on. So the first 3 months we got to fight a little bit, kind of got to cut our teeth as combat arms guys, and then came back and became the XO Alpha. Now we had Randy Phillips as the tank leader, another kind of stalwart of the community at the time, and Pete Schnurr checks in to be the company commander, now just recently retired Lieutenant Colonel Schnurr. Joe Gray is the first sergeant. Have some great platoon sergeants, Miguel Betancourt, Orpheus Brown. Guys that, even though I was now the XO and supposed to be one of the experienced guys coming off of a deployment to Iraq, really kind of helped continue to shape and mold me. Some phenomenal platoon commanders. Got one of them, Matt Rolfing, still running around the Marine Corps doing great things after graduating from School of Advanced Military Studies. Guys, phenomenal company. This deployment was not exactly the sexiest deployment in the world. But the time we went back, it was 2008. Iraq we really kind of started the transition, but my fondest and my fondest memory was we're doing a turnover with I think they were Bravo Company second tanks in Fallujah this time, and Rob Burton's the company commander, Gene Potes is the tank leader, D Paola is the XO, and I'm doing my first left seat, right seat, and D Paola's left, and so it's like me and D Paola's crew, and we're leading this patrol. And we're the lead tank, and we're coming back into Fallujah, and there stands then Major General Kelly. For those familiar with Fallujah, he's like, we're right at the traffic circle as you come in the west side of the city. And he kind of flags us down and starts walking over. And I'm like any other tanker at this point. I'm like, everybody loves tanks. Even 2-star generals love tanks. And keep in mind, I'm the only Alpha Company Marine on this patrol because everybody else is from the company we're replacing. He climbs up on his tank, on the tank, and he's like, what the hell are you doing in downtown Fallujah with a tank? And I'm like, left seat, right seat, sir, is like the only thing I could think to say. He's like, get out of here, get back to Camp Fallujah as fast as you can, and don't ever come back into the city. Nothing like I've been in the country for like 72 hours. Nothing like getting yelled at by the MEFCG in the first 72 hours.
Hey, you got to make your mark.
That's right. So
that's a great story.
Yeah. And then they sent us up to comb the desert for like 75 days in Operation Dan. And
right.
There's I won't get into it, but there's a funny movie quote about combing the desert, what you find in 75 days of combing the desert. Not a lot.
Right. Following that assignment, you were next assigned as a series commander and company commander for 2nd Recruit Training Battalion at MCRD, Marine Corps Recruit Depot, Parris Island, from 2009 to 2011. Despite being, opened up with a 2-star general conversation, how did being a tank officer help shape you for this assignment?
Well, I think, you go into an environment like Parris Island, not being prior enlisted myself, and even, going to the Naval Academy and not going to OCS, it's truly like a foreign environment. You're not really sure, you've seen the videos and whatnot, but you don't really know what to expect. And really what I think, especially for an officer in that environment, it's just about leadership. And that's what I had kind of learned growing up at First Tanks. You know, how to work with strong and capable and super professional NCOs and staff NCOs in an environment where they know 10,000 times more than you do. You know, as a young tank officer, and even as an old experienced tank officer, you know, you get on that tank and you have the least amount of knowledge of what that thing really truly can do. Just like, you know, never been a drill instructor, never been to drill instructor school, you know, saw them off in the distance occasionally. But you know, you form this team to accomplish the mission in that environment of making, you know, trying to make as many United States Marines as possible that step on the yellow footprints for the company you're in. And so that's really what I think. And then just kind of being operating in chaos, you know, understanding like the, you know, the right and wrong of things. And so that was one of my, I think one of the strengths that I was able to take in as an 1802, having the experience I had back at First Tanks.
It's an interesting perspective, and one that I didn't really consider for guys coming out of Naval Academy and whatnot, that, you know, you're thrown in that environment without really having any type of a true baseline, and you're gaining that baseline from day one. So yeah, it's a really interesting perspective. After your time on the island, you were then selected to maneuver captain's career course in Fort Benning, Georgia. What was your most valuable lesson learned at MCCC?
So I think the beauty, you know, and there's probably 100 opinions out there. Anybody that got a chance to go to a resident career level school would probably tell you that the one they went to was better than the other alternative, right? I mean, I remember asking, you know, probably 10 or 15 different majors and lieutenant colonels, what should I put as my top choice? And I mean, to a man, I think they all told me that the one that they went to was what I should put as my top choice for school. End up down at Fort Benning. They had just recently, I think I was like maybe the second class of second or third class of tankers down at Fort Benning when it was fully integrated. The nice thing about the way MCCC runs is it is basically a company commander and battalion OPSO course. And so having come from the drill field where I did not think about combined arms maneuver one time because my sole focus was, is that guy too close to that recruit? Really kind of helped prepare me to go back to be a company commander at 1st Tank Battalion. I remember, you know, sitting there writing my op orders at MCCC on combined arms breaches with a tank company or you know, some type of combined arms company that the Army might have had with, you know, tanks and strikers. So basically kind of a team tank or, you know, team mech concept. You know, even in the battalion phase of MCCC, you know, I'm the OPSO for a tank battalion as we're doing a planning exercise on a combined arms attack or a defense. And I remembered as a company commander later on, writing my MAC course op order and being like, I feel like I've written this 1,000 times already because I had done it at MCCC. And kind of just like the intuitive aspects of like, don't leave this out because, you know, that's what I got hit on at MCCC. And then obviously, you know, you meet a lot of Army captains that have a completely different perspective on life than Marines, but they're super smart individuals. They're super capable. And you kind of get to see a little bit of the other side of the coin there from our brother tankers in that service.
As somebody that fought at the top of your weight class for basically your entire career, did you start feeling yourself pulling away from the pack at MCCC? I mean, as a tanker, you're already kind of used to dealing in kind of much larger problem sets than what is normally posed at MCCC. And it seems like tankers do really well. I mean, you being at the top of that, did you start sensing that feeling?
Well, so I think one of the advantages we have as tankers, yeah, and whether you're the platoon commander or the company commander or, you know, tank leader, platoon sergeant, or all the way down even to the you know, the most junior driver or loader in the platoon is, we get used to operating somewhat independently very, very early. You know, 2nd Lieutenant Ashinhurst and Alpha Company 1st Platoon was sent out to support, you know, 3rd Battalion 8th Marines at Mojave Viper and 3rd Battalion 2nd Marines at Mojave Viper and EWS OFEC and POMFEX for IOC. and I didn't have my company commander and tank leader there to kind of give you like, hey, this is how we would do it. We didn't have the battalion staff helping us plan, whether it was how to resupply ourselves or the schema maneuver for the tanks. You're forced to do that very early on as a lieutenant in the tank community. You get sent out to the wolves, and it's figured out. So I think that you end up kind of just kind of being comfortable operating without a lot of guidance, and then you show up to work for an infantry battalion, and as smart and capable as they are, there's battalion opsos and ops chiefs and battalion commanders and company commanders that may or may not have any experience with tanks, and so you are truly the subject matter expert. You and your platoon sergeant, or you and your tank leader and first sergeant, and you got to be on your A game from day one, or they'll recognize that these guys aren't worth their salt. So, you start kind of getting ostracized, or, you become just the reserve all the time because they don't really know what to do with you. And so I think that's what I started seeing at MCCC compared to some of my peers. It's just the tanker ability to think through problems quickly and independently without needing a lot of, I don't mean this in a bad way, but not needing a lot of hand holding.
Mm-hmm. Returning back to First Tanks in 2011, you were then selected for an individual augment in support of 1st Marine Division Forward with Task Force Leatherneck. And it was here that you worked as the G3 Senior Watch Officer, which is operations, and the G3 Current Plans Officer in charge. Both those billets are extremely important, especially in theater. You already kind of touched on this, but I'll recircle back. How did your prior experience as a tank officer assist you in performance of these duties?
Yeah, again, I think it's just kind of the ability to think independently. Matter of fact, so I checked in back to First Tanks again, like right before Thanksgiving, and then the next week I was down at Camp Pendleton. At the time, I was the deputy current operations officer, just because they weren't really sure where they were going to put this captain who had been assigned to the Division G3, like the second day, the COPSO comes in and is like, I got to go on emergency leave. You're the COPSO now for MEFX. And, your first meeting is with the MEF G3 tomorrow afternoon. And for the next week and a half, I was the COPSO for 1st Marine Division, trying to, I've been a captain for like 3 years. I'm, just out of MCCC, haven't been a company commander, haven't been in an operational force unit in 3 years. And here I am. General Berger is the division commander, and so it was a good opportunity for me to once again I think help show that tankers, you put them in a stressful situation, and we're gonna figure out a way to rise to the occasion.
Thrown to the wolves once again. Yeah. Returning in 2012, you assumed command of Company D, 1st Tank Battalion. What were some of your proudest moments as the CO for Delta?
So, I think most officers would say this. I mean, short of some of the battalion commanders that, past battalion commanders that have said battalion commander was the best job, but I mean, company command there's nothing quite like it. And I was fortunate not only to be a company commander for 2 full years, but we got to go to Afghanistan as a company on tanks. Wasn't sure that was going to happen, but obviously dynamics changed in Afghanistan, and they sent Delta Company. It's such a phenomenal company we had. Started off with Joey Steps, the tank leader, although he got pulled to be the 4th chief before we deployed. Arnell Narvis took over for him. Tim Hartman was the 1st sergeant. He was a grunt by MOS, and so he really understood how to prepare a combat arms company for deployment. Some great platoon sergeants and great young tank commanders. Several who you've interviewed: Freddie Esquivel, Ray Chamugam, Ryan Milo. I mean, just such a rock star company. And they demonstrated that in spades in Afghanistan. While a lot of things were quieting down in Afghanistan, Delta Company kind of got a chance to prove that we're really good in combat. And I always say we were fortunate at timing because every other American force pretty much had to partner with some Afghan force, but they didn't really have anybody for us to partner with. So we were really like the utility infielder for the regiment. We could go anywhere and do anything. And right off the bat, our metal was tested. We fought an Operation Dynamic Partner, which was a combined operation with MARSOC. And I think a lot of us that had come from like just Iraq experience where we were used to, hearing the gunshots off in the distance and then the tanks would show up and now everybody was like shaking hands and kissing babies because they didn't want anything to do with the tanks. We learned pretty quickly on that the Taliban didn't think quite like that. And they were willing to come out and fight. And a lot of the tank companies that went to Afghanistan experienced that the Taliban wasn't necessarily concerned about heavy armor. And so for 6 days at a place called Shurake, the Marines fought pretty hard. And I think just kind of, one of the things we always advertised, I think we fired 129 main gun rounds and every single one of them hit exactly what it was supposed to hit. Not a single person was that didn't deserve to die was killed in those 6 days. 20,000 plus odd coax rounds. Several thousand 50 cal, and the Marine tank company showed that when you need to fight, we're a really good asset to have with you.
Hoorah.
And then I know some of the other guys have talked about it. May 13th of that deployment, we dealt with a pretty significant attack on combat outpost Shergazi, where most of us lived. I don't remember. I think it was 58 wounded, 3 killed. It was a large suicide vehicle-borne Aide breached the perimeter wall, and it was followed by a dismounted attack. I mean, the tanks. There's probably a lot of differing opinions on this, but I think tanks kind of saved the day that day between immediately getting platoon tanks outside the gate, locking down the perimeter, preventing any of their attacks, to guys who couldn't get on their tank right away for different reasons, or guys from the headquarters platoon forming litter teams and doing CASEVAC, our corpsmen doing, minor life-saving surgeries in the LZ to try to keep guys alive. It was a huge team effort. It was a testament to the rehearsals that the platoons did on a daily basis. Not just what they were going to do outside the wire, but actually rehearsing like what happens if we get attacked here. And even though it was a tough day for a lot of people, I think when I look back on that day specifically, I realized that when you have a tight, cohesive unit, they will rise to the occasion despite the circumstances.
That really captures the essence of tanks and who we are, and the full spectrum of capabilities that we bring to the battlefield. Not just tankers, but the tank community as a whole. So yeah, I mean that day goes down in history, and may those Marines rest. Changing gears here for a moment, though, I noticed in your bio, I know, sir, that you're a humble guy, and reading your bio even expands upon that, because you left out the fact that later that year you were named for the Leftwich and actually won the Leftwich. And for those that don't know, the Leftwich Award is the #1 award that a company grade officer can receive for recognition above and beyond normal duties. And I'm probably not doing a very good job explaining the definition of the Leftwich Award, but you left it out. So I'm going to have an opportunity for you to kind of talk about, how that came to be, if you knew you were even in for it, and then winning it. What was that whole thing like?
So Lieutenant Colonel Poland at the time, one of my mentors, one of the guys that I hold in some of the highest esteem of any officer that I've ever worked for. He told me, I guess maybe around Christmas time, that he was going to nominate me for the Leftwich Trophy. I kind of thought about it. I was like, that's a huge honor. I think so that would have been Christmas of 2013. A tanker hadn't won it since 1980. And I had zero preconceived notions that I was going to change that track record. General Nicholson was the CG of 1st Marine Division. He was up at the tank battalion doing an award ceremony for some Marines from the deployment that received Purple Hearts. he announced to the battalion that I was going to be the 1st Marine Division nominee out of several other super capable officers, a lot of which we fought alongside with in Afghanistan. And then when the message popped, I don't know, sometime in March of 2014 that I had received it, super humbling experience. And it really kind of causes you to reflect on, obviously the guys that were part of Delta Company at the time, several of the guys I've named already, Chamuga, Milo, Marcus Sanchez, Jose Rivera. I mean, I could go down the entire list of tank commanders, Tim Hartman, the 1st Sergeant, Arnel Narvaez, Jason McKay, who was one of the Australian warrant officers that was part of Tank Battalion for a while. And then back to, again, the Jay Caroshas, and guys and Joey Steps, guys who had like really helped kind of shape me as an officer. And yeah, other than the real fancy dinner my wife and I got a chance to go to in Washington, D.C. when they presented me the trophy, we got to meet Ross Perot. That was pretty cool. My wife got to sit next to him at dinner. And but my favorite part about it was the dinner was a Thursday night. We were back on an airplane out of National Airport at 4:00 the next morning, and I was in an assembly area by 1800 on Friday afternoon.
Hell yeah!
Out for I think Desert Scimitar or something like that. And once again, obviously I'm probably droning on about this trophy more than I should, but that's where tankers want to be. We want to be out there in that assembly area, getting ready, going through pre-combat checks, pre-combat inspections, and getting ready to cross the line of departure into our next attack.
Yes, sir. Well, I will tell you that probably a long time overdue, but congratulations, because you represent the community outstandingly.
Thank you.
2014, you were assigned the Operations Division plans for plans, policy, and operations for the Marine Corps. This is a 2-part question. What was it like working at PPNO? And second part of that question will be, what did you learn that you didn't already know about the Corps?
Well, so the first 6 months at PPNO, I came home every day thinking I was going to get fired because I don't think anything really prepares you to work at the service headquarters. I didn't know what anybody was talking about. I didn't know I didn't know anything about the money. There was acronyms on acronyms on acronyms that I didn't understand. I would literally sit in 4 or 5 hour meetings as the PPNO representative and not say a word because I didn't know what anybody was talking about. So it was real eye-opening, kind of humbling experience early on, especially, I'd just gotten selected and pinned on major. And, but then it kind of starts clicking, and you really kind of start seeing the method to the madness of headquarters Marine Corps. And the nice thing about PPNO working for the Ground Combat Arms branch at POG is you're not really an expert in anything, but you kind of learn everything. So I got to be in meetings about requirements development for the amphibious combat vehicle. And then I would be in a meeting about a service level war game, or I'd be the GCE rep for a war game. Mm-hmm. And then I'd be working with somebody from INL on expeditionary logistics. So you kind of got to see a little bit. And while we weren't quite to the level we are now with force design, you kind of started seeing the wheels in motion on how the Marine Corps was going to change to face future combat threats. So good experience. I don't miss riding the train every day or sitting in traffic on I-66 trying to get home.
2015 was a very memorable year for you, as you were distinguished by being hand selected to serve as the aide de camp to both the 36th and the 37th Commandants of the Marine Corps. What was it like having these amazing opportunities?
Yeah, I get asked that quite a bit. Like, what was it like to be the aide for the Commandant? And, I worked for General Dunford for 4.5 months before he became the chairman. And then I worked for General Neller for 9 or 10 months. You get this opportunity to sit next to a guy that has made it to the pinnacle of their profession. Both of them had been doing it for 40 plus years. They have more experience in their left hand than most of us have in our entire bodies as it comes to being a Marine officer. I mean, these guys were commissioned in the 70s. I mean, before I was born. and just getting an opportunity to sit next to them and talk to them, hear their perspective on leadership, hear their perspective on where the Marine Corps is going, where the Marine Corps had been. We were in some pretty dynamic times as it was coming to integration of the combat arms community with female Marines, and a lot of the emotion and opinion that was being fed to the commandant's office. And you see this guy who's 60 something years old, still has to take his PFT, still has to take his CFT, still has to get height and weight just like the rest of us. Meanwhile, he's making this monumental decision that's going to potentially be historic in the Marine Corps, or making some decision on millions and millions or billions of dollars. Got to be the fly on the wall for some pretty unique conversations, and so it's kind of like getting a master's degree in leadership without having to pay for it, other than be on the highway by 4 o'clock every morning and hope to get home by 9 o'clock at night every night.
One of the photos I'm going to showcase is going to be you at Belleau Wood. What's the background of that story?
Yeah, so it was, I probably should know this off the top of my head, but it was one of the anniversaries. Almost every year, the Commandant of the ACMAC goes to the Memorial Day service out there at Belleau Wood. And there's a small service up in the wood itself. There's a platoon of French soldiers, and then there's a platoon of Marines from either 5th Marines or 6th Marines. I think they trade off every year. And then you go down to the Aide cemetery, and there's a large Memorial Day service. General Neller was speaking at it that year. And then you march, I don't know, maybe about half a mile to a mile down the hill from the cemetery, and there's this property. It's like this nice French chateau, and there's a nice kind of cocktail reception, and in that is kind of the famed Devil Dog Fountain. That kind of the lore is, if you're a Marine and you go there, you got to drink water from the fountain. And so you see the picture of me drinking water from the fountain. Who knows where that water's coming from? But everybody there, and you're in dress blues and white trousers, and so it's a pretty unique experience, but much more so to be up in the wood. And you can still see the kind of the depressions of the old fighting holes in the trenches, and know kind of where at least the legacy of the modern Marine Corps kind of started.
Yeah, that truly is an amazing experience. Later that same year, you returned back to 1st Tanks to serve as operations officer. How did the battalion change from the previous times that you served there?
So every other time I had been at 1st Tanks, everybody was on this, hectic deployment cycle. Companies were, in and out the door, and the MU platoons were running and gunning with their rotation. When I came back as the OPSO, nobody was going anywhere other than the MU platoons. And so you could see the challenge that company commanders and tank leaders, first sergeants, and then even at the battalion OPSO with myself and Matt Heath as the ops chief at the time, and Colonel Chris Myers was the battalion commander. Everybody was doing all these training events early on in my career with that end state of get on a plane and fly to Iraq or Afghanistan. And now there was not that end state. And so relearning ways to motivate Marines to go out and train, because for a lot, especially the young guys who would join the Marine Corps because they were we were fighting in Afghanistan, you're getting ready, chance to go to combat, come back with a ton of cool war stories. Now it seemed like a never ending, gunnery, and then platoon gunnery, and then water ops, and then a company exercise, and then ITX, and then Steel Night, and then rinse and repeat over and over and over again for your 4-year enlistment, or your time there as a lieutenant or a captain. And so it was challenging in that regard to kind of preach you never know when it's going to happen. The guys before OIF 1 weren't, this is what they were doing, and then all of a sudden something happens, and you got to be ready to go. So there was a lot of challenges. I think that our older pre-OIF generation really understood and really was really good at, that we were having to try to relearn without some of that institutional knowledge, because most of us had grown up in a go because you're deploying in 4 months.
Right. It was during this tour that you assigned to and deployed with the 15th Marine Expeditionary Unit as the Future Operations Officer. Working in FOPS, what skills did you use that you had learned while serving in tanks, and what were your biggest challenges?
Again, in kind of in that independent operator mindset. It was an individual augment billet. We knew I was destined for one because I hadn't deployed in a couple of years. And we had kind of said, battalion commander and I had kind of said, like, hey, if MU opens up, I would like to do that just to get that experience, because I was never a MU platoon commander. And while it'd be cool to go to, Kuwait or Iraq and, be in a COC or a JOC as we were, going through OIR, if I had an opportunity to do a MU, that would be, I thought, more beneficial. And sure enough, that opportunity presented itself. We jumped on it. And having never done a MU, trying to figure out, what I had learned at like EWS non-resident, which seemed like 100 years before that. I finished like the first at sea period, and then I was on an airplane to Singapore to do a planning conference. I was the only MU representative that went.
Wow.
Have to do a theater security cooperation planning conference with the Singaporeans, and then fly to another country a couple weeks later and do the same thing with their military representatives, and deal them at the State Department. I was the 15th MU's representative to the MU OAG back in Quantico that year. Like, I got like 3 months experience on a MU. Of course, I'm the perfect guy to send. And then once we set sail, again, it's just kind of about, you have all these assets, and you just kind of got to make them all work to reach a common goal. And it's just kind of like what we do at a tank battalion every day. Everything from 14 tanks spread out over, kilometers of terrain, and times that by, 3 or 4, plus you got infantrymen showing up in Amtracs, plus you got, combat engineers showing up as your breaching force. And then you got however many hundreds of rolling stock back in the trains and tow and scout platoons, and everybody's got to find a way to kind of work in unison to accomplish the mission. And that's kind of what the MU does. And the Marine Expeditionary Units writ large do that really well. So it was a huge learning experience for me.
When you returned from that deployment, you then attended the U.S. Army Command and General Staff in Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. What are some of your memories from this time?
CGSC, I got to be the OPSO again for like 3 months, which was like really cool. Coming back, working for Lieutenant Colonel Matt Zuma, then working with Manny Herrera. Again, 2 guys that I just hold in the highest of esteem. But went to CGSC there at Fort Leavenworth. First and foremost, I've never been to the Midwest. I never experienced cold like I experienced in the winter in Kansas. That was the number one lesson my family learned. There's East Coast and West Coast cold, and then there's Midwest cold. But as much as we like to knock the Army as Marines, more in a joking manner, they do schools really well. It gave me an opportunity to kind of really think, kind of think about leadership, kind of think about, what it would be like to, potentially command a battalion one day, or work again for a commander, and how it helps shape, kind of help shape the environment so they can make decisions. And then again, just kind of the leadership aspects of, as you start getting more and more senior and more experienced, never losing sight of the fact that at some point, some Lance Corporal has got to walk the blue line or drive the blue line or the blue arrow you just drew on a map. And if you can't put it into the perspective of that Lance Corporal that's going to have to move along that blue arrow, you're not going to do them any favors when they actually get down there on the ground. And that's really what I kind of helped put in perspective for me at CGSC.
Yeah, that is a very interesting perspective because very often, especially working through the TTGs and the war games, you move pieces around a sand table, you move a graphic on a computer, but really it's that personal aspect that remains important. So I appreciate you bringing that out.
Yeah, I
2000,
think it's something we forget about a lot, is especially as us, as we getting up into that field grade officer rank, is there's some 19-year-old that's going to have to do the thing you just said. And you got to make it realistic for them. You got to make it able for them to accomplish it, and do your absolute best to help them get to the other end safely.
Yes, sir. And having experienced that in real time out at 29 Palms as a Coyote, whenever they would dig all night, set in a defense, and you go out there the next morning to tell them that their SDZs are fouled in those positions they just dug, that they need to be redug. So that's
Absolutely.
yeah, that definitely puts a personal perspective behind it. 2019, you were assigned to your current unit, which is Manpower and Reserve Affairs. First, you were assigned as the enlisted retention section. And then subsequently, you came to hold your current billet, which is the section head for enlisted retention for MMEA. And sir, I know this is going to be a tough question to kind of field, but I'd like to have a conversation because I know that there was a lot of work and a lot of things that you all did because of this divestment. What was it like when you first learned of the service decision to divest of Marine Corps armor?
So I think, there's lots of opinions out there. You and I talked before about it, but it certainly wasn't. There was a little bit of a gut punch, because here's things that you've been doing for, in my case, 16 years at that point. You saw all the phenomenal things, going back, even going back to Desert Storm, because we still had those guys running around the community when I was coming up, and then obviously the entire lineage of the tank community all the way back 75 plus years, and then all the phenomenal things we did in OIF and OEF, and to kind of see that coming to an end was certainly not unemotional. But you take confidence in our leaders that this was not something that, this was not a decision. I mean, this type of conversations have been happening for years. This wasn't something that people just woke up and said, "Oh, let's just do it." And so, I'm optimistic that Marines tend to get it right, and as tough as that may be to swallow as a tanker, I think we look at ourselves first as Marines, we're moving in the direction that I think a lot of really, really smart people have said this is the way we need to go.
Yes, sir. And I know from your seat in particular, you did a heck of a lot of work to take care of the community. What special provisions did you personally oversee to take care of this community?
Yes. So one of the things we handle in the enlisted retention section is lateral moves. We knew we weren't going to be able to keep a lot of tankers as tankers. There was just not going to be the billet requirements for them. We were able to get it to where staff NCOs who had spent, decades and more in the Marine Corps could continue to stay as tankers if they were unable to or didn't want to lat move, because it's not unemotional to try to start a new community as a staff sergeant or a gunny. But we opened up an opportunity for sergeants and below to pretty much lat move to any MOS that they wanted to, which most Marines are restricted to about 12 to 14 different critical MOSs that the service headquarters names every year. Things like EOD and Recon and whatnot, MARSOC. And I tell you what, we're seeing good success. We're seeing good numbers. We're seeing Marine tankers want to stay Marines. And then we also have tried to smooth the inter-service transfer policy, because we know that there's guys that, dad was a tanker and grandpa was a tanker and all their uncles were tankers. And that's just what they want to do. They just want to tank. And that's great. The Army has a lot of awesome tank units out there in their combined arms battalions. And try to make that process a little bit easier as best we could. So those are the kind of things that I get a chance to kind of see firsthand, because most of those things come through my office. And I say we've had staff NCOs lat move to new communities. We've had young Marines lat move to new communities, and so And we've had a lot of guys go take their abilities to the Army, and they're going to be used to do God's work in that service.
Yes, sir. And this channel, as you know, sir, has a message. And somebody like yourself that has dedicated your life to the armor community and has done exceptionally well, and really kind of set the bar for others to follow forever. Being personally involved in the divestment of armor, what is your message for today's Marines that are making the tough decision of what to do now if they haven't already kind of done so?
Well, first thing I would tell, especially the guys that have been around for a minute, is nothing takes away the accomplishments you made for this country. I think especially any tanker that spent time in Iraq or Afghanistan knows that there are infantrymen and guys from other MOSs that are alive today because of the contributions of the tank community. And whether or not they directly know that, because you were the guy that showed up on the scene and put the main gun round into the right spot at the right time, or you were just the guy that showed up on the scene and everybody decided to shut up because the big guys had showed up to fight. And then for the younger guys, I mean, there's still the future is still going to hold people that don't like our way of life, and are going to want to mess with that. And the nation's going to need its Marines to go do things that 99.9% of people are not willing to go do. And so if you can find an opportunity to stay in the Marine Corps or join the Army for that matter, to do it is making it through OCS, making it through the Naval Academy, making it through boot camp puts you in a different category of people. I know that kind of sounds cliche or maybe arrogant from what we do, but we're going to need those people in the future. So hopefully they stick around.
Yes, sir. I wholeheartedly agree, and I appreciate you saying that. I'm going to steal a moment here to thank the viewers and thank the subscribers. We continue to grow, and it's through these subscriptions that the channel continues to gain momentum, and our stories are being told. Thank you, and if you haven't already done so, please do subscribe and press the notification for new episodes. And sir, thank you to you. You've been somebody that I have admired, like I said in the opening, for my entire career. I mean, that you have really set the bar by which we've all kind of been measured. I really do appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule, especially the night before Thanksgiving, to sit down with the channel and provide these stories, sir. It's extremely valuable. So I thank you very much.
No, hey, and JR, thanks for doing this. This is huge for the community. It's huge for the lineage. And as long as we have internet connection, people are going to go back and watch these stories and have some fond memories of their time at one of our tank battalions.
Yes, sir. Thank you. And parting shots are yours, sir.
Yeah. Hey, I just it's being a tanker is one of the greatest pleasures of my life. I look at it as family. Not just those three other guys that are confined in a 5 foot by 5 foot space with you for hours and weeks and months on end, but the guys that you see on the ramp, the guys you see in the assembly area, the guys come up to the back of the C squared, and you have those conversations that have to do with nothing, but it's just about that camaraderie. And then from a personal note, I mean, my family has grown up in 29 Palms, California. It's kind of our home away from home. My kids got more pictures in their rooms of them standing next to tanks than and half of them I'm not even in. And so, to all the 1802s, 1812s, 1869s, 2146s out there, it's been a great privilege to serve as a part of this community.
Thank you, sir. And with that, I'll sign off. Semper Fi. Happy Thanksgiving and Godspeed.
Happy Thanksgiving, JR. Thank you.
Hurrah.